Today, we're going to be working with Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager and going through the application lifecycle of Microsoft 365 apps. To get started, I'll walk you through building your initial application and getting that deployed to your devices, followed by software updates and servicing options, including automatic deployment rules. And then finally, we'll go through monitoring and reporting how to track these devices and the various versions that you have in your environment. And as always, we'll cover best practices and tips and tricks along the way. So if you're interested, be sure to stick around. To get started, I'm going to go over some of the requirements necessary to follow along with this video. So first off, you should have a currently supported version of Configuration Manager deployed to your environment or to your lab. As part of that, at a minimum, you should have a primary site, a management point, a distribution point, and a software update point. Now, each of these should be fully deployed and configured to the point where you have some devices enrolled in the environment and you've already deployed packages successfully. Now, if you have these boxes checked, you can move on into the application creation and deployment section. If not, check out the description below and I'll have a link to one of our evaluation kits that'll get you set up right away. The first step in the lifecycle management of Microsoft 365 apps is with the initial application. So we want to build that application and get it deployed out to our devices. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the console. So here I have the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager console started up. We're going to navigate to the software library workspace on the left, and then select the Office 365 Client Management folder on the left navigation. Now, whether or not you already have something in your environment, you might see some charts filled in here, but really what we're going to spend time on right now is the Office 365 installer over to the right. So we'll go ahead and click on this. This is going to launch the wizard to create your application. And why we go through this process is because it's actually going to connect outbound to our web configuration tool and help you build your XML exactly how you want it for your environment. So once the wizard starts up, we'll go ahead and give this a name. Then we need to choose a content location where we're going to have this package stored. So I'm going to go to my packages directory, go to applications, and create a new folder here to store the source content. With that in place, we can go ahead and click next. And here we are with the configuration tool that I mentioned a moment ago. So we'll click go to the configuration tool, which will then open up a web view into this tool. Now you want to walk through the configuration designer and select the options appropriate for your environment. In my case, I'm going to choose 64-bit for the architecture. The Office suite I want to use is Microsoft 365 Apps for Enterprise. I'm not going to do anything with Visio or Project at this point. In terms of update channel, I'm going to go ahead and select Monthly Enterprise channel. For the version, it's automatically filling in the latest version as of this month, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. And then for app selection, I can see that OneDrive Groove is automatically disabled and so is Skype for Business. The rest of these apps look good for my environment, so I'm going to leave them selected. The background service for Microsoft Search and Bing is a preference. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. We'll click Next. For languages, I'm going to go ahead and choose English US, and I'll go ahead and add in one additional language. And you can see when I do this, it gives me the option to do full, partial, or proofing. So I'm going to come down to German, and I'm going to say I want the full language. I'm going to go ahead and click Add. And then I'm going to go ahead and go for Next into the installation options. Do I want to shut down running applications? No, I do not want this to be disruptive to the user. I'm going to go ahead and click Next to the updates and upgrade. Yes, I want to leave all of these toggled on. If there are any previous versions or MSI products installed, it will automatically uninstall them. I'm going to go ahead and click Next to licensing and activation. I want to automatically accept the EULA. And for product activation, I do want user-based. I'm going to click Next into General. I'm not going to fill this in. So I'll go ahead and click next, and I don't have any additional application preferences that I want to select, so I'll click finish here. And then in the top right, we'll hit review. This will give us the default file format dialog. I'm going to go ahead and choose keep current settings for my environment and click OK. It then gives me a flyout with all of the configuration options that I can review before I complete this. It all looks good, so I'm going to click submit. And that has generated the XML that this application is going to use. Now I'm back at the wizard, so I can click next into the deployment settings. I'm not going to set up the deployment of this application right now, so I'm going to leave that selected at no and click next. Here's the summary of the deployments. Next again, and now we're into the progress status bar. Now this is going to sit here for a few moments. In the background, what we're doing is downloading the latest version of the Office deployment tool from the Office CDN, and then we are running that with a /download switch across the XML that you created. What this is doing is downloading all of the necessary bits based on the configuration that you specified, so that application can then be packaged and deployed. So we'll let this finish up and come back once we've got a completed package. All right, it looks like that job completed, so we'll go ahead and click close on the wizard, and you can find your new application by going up to the left and expanding application management and clicking on the applications node, and here we have our new application for Microsoft 365 apps. Now, before we start rolling this content out to our DPs and deploying it to our collections, let's take a quick step back and review what this application contains. If you remember, when we went through the configuration designer, a build number had to be specified, and it was automatically populated for you, but it was a static build number. What that means is the content that was downloaded and the XML that was generated is hard-coded to that build number. With M365 apps, build numbers update at least once a month, and when a new build is introduced, it typically contains security fixes, quality fixes, and potentially feature enhancements. So as a best practice, if you're going to continue using this workflow, you're going to periodically want to update the source files for this application. To do this, navigate to the directory that contains these source files. In this example, I've created a new application directory just called Monthly Enterprise Channel because I will be updating these, so I don't want it linked to any particular version. Now, you can optionally back up this directory in the event that you might want to restore these files for any reason. We'll go ahead and go into the application directory. We can select and delete the Office folder because we're going to re-download those files. Open up configuration.xml. If you have a version attribute, go ahead and remove it from the file. We'll go ahead and save those changes. And then from within the File Explorer window, if you shift right click, we can choose Open PowerShell window here. From within the PowerShell prompt, we're going to type /setup.exe space /download space /configuration.xml and hit enter. Now in the background, the Office deployment tool is now downloading a fresh set of Office files. If we move this window down, we can see a new Office directory now exists. And the bits that are being downloaded are based on what's in the XML file. So if you have language packs or any other configuration items in there, that content will be part of this download. If you specified an update channel, this is going to download the latest version for that update channel. If you did not specify an update channel, it's going to download the latest version for current channel by default. Once that download is completed, we can head back over to the Configuration Manager console and update our content across all of our distribution points. This will ensure that when a user gets this application, it's not excessively behind on versions and you're not introducing potential security vulnerabilities into the environment. If you're thinking to yourself, this looks like a lot of overhead, and maybe asking the question, is there an easier way? Then this is a great segue into my tips and tricks for this section. Yes, there is an easier way, and we refer to it as a dynamic install package for Microsoft 365 apps. Essentially, instead of managing all of the content in ConfigMgr, all you're going to provide is the Office deployment tool and your XML. Then at runtime on the local device, the Office deployment tool will connect to the CDN and download the bits it needs dynamically. Now, there are pros and cons to both scenarios. With a static package, you have the overhead of managing and updating the content, but it's then downloaded and cached locally and run locally at install time, so you're generally going to get a faster install. Whereas on the dynamic side, we are not managing the content, we don't have to deal with any overhead, but at the install time, it does need to get out to the internet and download those bits. And depending on the end user's connection, that could be very, very fast or very, very slow. So those are things to keep in mind. Now let's take a look. I'm going to walk you through how to modify this package to be a dynamic install versus a static install. First off, we do not need to make any modifications to the application properties themselves. All of the settings defined when we created this application are compatible with it being a dynamic install. What we really need to modify are the content source files. Now, you specified a folder path when you originally created the application. If you don't remember that source path, you can go to the properties of the application, go to deployment types, and edit your deployment type. You'll find the source path on the content tab. I'm going to go ahead and open File Explorer and navigate to that directory now. And once you get into that directory, you're going to find 3 objects. The first one's a folder called Office. These are all the bits Office needs to do the installation. The second one is a configuration.xml. These are the instructions that you provided when you went through the configuration wizard. And the final one is setup.exe, which is the Office deployment tool. First, we can completely delete the Office directory. We are not going to provide these bits with ConfigMgr. We're going to let them download from the CDN at install time. Next, we're going to open the configuration XML with Notepad and make one modification. On the second line, on the add element, at the very end, you're going to find an attribute called version. We're going to go ahead and delete the version. What this means is when the XML is processed, because a version is not specified, it will go off the update channel that is specified and download the latest version available. So with those changes in place, I'm going to save my XML. We can close Notepad and close File Explorer. At this point, the application is ready to go and we can start rolling it out to our distribution points. So I'll right click on the application, we'll choose distribute content, click next, next. I'm going to add it to my distribution point group, all distribution points, and start distributing that. And while that's going on in the background, I can also set up my initial deployment. So I'm going to right click again, we'll choose deploy. For the collection, I'm going to actually make this available to all of my users. So I'm going to choose all users, click OK, click next, next again, make this available, and complete this wizard. Okay, that concludes the packaging and deployment of Microsoft 365 apps. Next up, we'll be talking about software update management. The second step in the lifecycle management of Microsoft 365 apps is going to be focused on software updates. So you've started deploying the apps out to your devices, but there are new builds coming out every month and you don't want to be missing out on important security updates, quality fixes, and feature improvements. So to get started, I'm first going to go through a couple of prerequisites to help you get your environment dialed in to make update management easier. The first prerequisite is to update your software update point to support the new products. So for this, in the console, we're going to go down to the administration workspace. On the left, we'll expand site configuration, select sites, right click on your site and choose configure site components and select software update point. And then from the properties dialog, you're going to go ahead and click this classifications tab at the top. Make sure the updates classification is already checked. If not, go ahead and check it. Then we're going to go to the products tab, and from the filter at the top, we can just type 365 and hit enter, and this will filter us down to the product we're after, which is Microsoft 365 apps, Office 2019, Office LTSC. So make sure that's checked, click apply, and then you can close this property window. Now that we've enabled these new products, we'll go ahead and force a software update synchronization so that can get underway while we work on some of the other prerequisites. All right, so to do this, we're going to go to the software library workspace. Go ahead and expand the Office 365 client management folder and select the Office 365 updates node. And then in the ribbon in the top left, you can go ahead and click on Synchronize Software Updates, and on the dialog window, just click Yes. For this next prerequisite, we're going to be working with client settings. There's a couple of key settings that you'll want to make sure you have configured and assigned to your devices to prepare them to receive Office updates from Configuration Manager. So for this, we'll jump back over to the console, head to the Administration workspace, and then select Client Settings on the left. Now, in your environment, you may have already established some custom client device settings that you update and maintain. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new set of client settings by clicking the icon in the top left. Then we'll provide a name. And for categories, we're going to select hardware inventory and software updates. Then to configure hardware inventory, we'll select it from the list on the left. For settings, you'll want to make sure hardware inventory is enabled and that the inventory scheduled is configured to a value that meets the needs of your environment. I'll select Set Classes. And from the Classes view, I'm going to type Office in the search field. This is going to filter the results to everything that includes Office in the title. The one that we want to focus on is the first option here, Office 365 configurations. And if you expand this, you're going to find a number of interesting properties, things like CDN base URL, update channel, version to report, a lot of pertinent information around update management. The other classes are optional and deal more with compatibility. So for instance, if you had some devices on Office 2016 that you were migrating to Microsoft 365 apps, you would definitely want to make sure these are checked. Once you're happy with your selections, go ahead and click OK. And then going back to the left, we're now going to select Software Updates. For these settings, you'll definitely want to make sure Software Updates is enabled on your clients and that the scan schedule and reevaluation schedule, again, are set to meet the needs of your organization. If we scroll down, there are two options specific to Microsoft 365 apps. The first one is called Enable Management of the Office 365 Client Agent. You'll want to make sure this is set to yes, and this is going to turn on something called Office Management COM, which basically tells Office to get its update instructions from Configuration Manager. Next is Enable Update Notifications for Microsoft 365 apps. So the apps, when they receive updates, there's a native notification experience. So this prompt is basically saying, do you want the native experience as well as the Software Center notifications, or do you only want the Software Center notifications? In my case, I'm going to leave it set to no, so my users will only see Software Center notifications. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and that will save my new set of client device or custom client device settings. So since I created a new one, I'm going to have to right click on this, say deploy. I'll target my collection of choice and click OK. Now that will take some time to propagate to my devices. They'll need to go through a policy refresh and then also collect and submit their hardware inventory. So for this last prereq, let's go ahead and build a dynamic collection for Microsoft 365 apps, and we can use this to deploy our software updates to. So for this, I'm going to go back to Assets and Compliance, select the device collections, and we're going to right click and hit Create Device Collection. Now in the wizard, I'm going to go ahead and put in a name. I'll just call this Devices with Microsoft 365 apps. And then the limiting collection, I'm going to choose all desktops and server clients. All right, we'll go ahead and click next. This is going to be a query-based collection for dynamic use. So I'm going to click Add Rule, click Query Rule. In the name, I'm just going to put M365 apps, and then I'll click Edit Query Statement. And then from the query statement window, I'm going to click Show Query Language, and I'm actually just going to paste in this query. Now, this query will be linked in the description below in our documentation for building dynamic collections for Microsoft 365 apps. But with that in there, I'm going to click OK, OK again. And then finally, you might want to review how frequently you want this collection membership to update. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 1 day. And then next, next, and close. All right, so I have my new collection here that I created. Assuming that hardware inventory classes have started moving data into your database, I should be able to do an update membership on this. And right away, I've got 6 objects. That's great. Now I'm ready to start deploying some software updates to these devices. Once those prerequisites make their way out to your environment, you'll be ready to start building some software update groups and assigning updates to your devices. So let's take a couple of minutes and go through that workflow. For this, we'll be working in the software library workspace, and there's two specific directories we'll be working from. The first one is the software updates directory, and this contains all of the nodes for Configuration Manager to manage software updates. The second location is the Office 365 Client Management directory, specifically the Office 365 Updates node underneath. And this is unique because it contains all of the current Microsoft 365 app updates based on your last synchronization. With the Office 365 Updates node selected, you should see a number of updates listed. And this view is very much the same view you would have if you were managing Windows updates under the All Software Updates node. So you have things like the icons, which represent whether an update is current, superseded, or expired. You have the title, article ID, required, downloaded, is deployed. These are all criteria that are often used to identify and assign updates. Before we start selecting updates to deploy, it's important to understand what the update channels are and the naming convention of these updates. Now, I'll have a link in the description below to a video that covers update channels, but to summarize, we have three production channels: current, monthly enterprise, and semi-annual. Now, with monthly enterprise and semi-annual, we offer two versions every month. We have a production version and an extended support version. And this is targeted at organizations that need a little extra time to adopt the next major version of that update. So for example, monthly enterprise in the month of April received 2302 as a production version release, and then we offered a security update to 2301, which is the extended support release. Okay, the challenge here is that both updates are not superseded. They're both current updates. So you want to avoid deploying both the production version and the extended support version to the same device at the same time. If you do this, you're likely going to see the update fail, which then also impacts your compliance numbers. So let's take a look at the naming convention to get a better understanding on how you can avoid this. In this blog post, which I'll have linked in the description below, we go into detail on the naming convention for Microsoft 365 apps. Now, I'm going to be focusing here on the release type because this is the really important piece. But before I dive into that, understand that these updates are cumulative. So if you miss maybe 2 months worth of updates, but you install the current month's update for that channel, you're going to get all of the changes prior. Now, with that in mind, the release type has three variations. We have feature update, quality update, and extended quality update. A feature update is any update that's new and contains new features. So for monthly enterprise channel, every month is a new feature update. In April, you get 2302, which has new features, and in May, you'll get 2303, which again has new features, therefore feature update is in the title. With semi-annual enterprise channel, we only get a new feature update in January and July, which means in February, it's no longer going to have feature update in the title, it will have quality update in the title. However, it does contain the feature changes that came in January, again, because it's cumulative. So you don't necessarily need to worry or stay latched to the fact that I need to make sure I deploy my feature update first before I get to the next quality update. Just deploy the latest update. That's the rule of thumb you want to follow. Next, you have extended quality update, and this is tied specifically to that extended support version that I mentioned a moment ago. You'll only be deploying these if you know you're going to be a version behind or staying on that previous release for a period of time, in which case you'll avoid deploying anything with feature update or quality update and only be deploying the current extended quality update until you're ready to move to the next version. Now let's jump back into the console and go over some deployment methods using ConfigMgr. Now I'm going to cover two methods. One's going to be manual and the other one will be using automation. So to start off, I'm in the Office 365 Updates node and I'm going to do some search criteria here. So I'm going to come over to Add Criteria. I'll choose Required, click Add, and for Required, we're going to type in greater than or equal to 1 and then run that search. I immediately get 4 results back. I can see these two are superseded, so I don't need to worry about those. And then I have these two, which to me show they're relative to my devices. They both show required and they both show current. But now that we know about release type, if we look at the title, we can see 2302 here is a feature update and 2301 is an extended quality update. This is where the problem lies. If I was to right click on both of these and deploy them, I'm going to end up deploying an update that's probably going to fail. So For a manual deployment, I'm just going to select a 2302 update, then I'll choose deploy, in which case I get the deployment wizard. Now, I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's very much the standard software update deployment wizard. You'll provide a name, put in your collection, and it's going to walk you through your deployment settings, which are pretty straightforward. Your scheduling, building a package, so on and so forth. Now, that's a manual method and probably not one you're going to want to go through multiple times. If you're on current channel, multiple times a month, or at least monthly on these other channels. So let's take a look at how to automate this using an automatic deployment rule. Under software updates, we'll go to the automatic deployment rules node, right click here, choose create automatic deployment rule, and then we'll go through the wizard to get a rule set up. So I'm going to go ahead and provide a name for my rule. I don't have any templates. I'm going to go to a collection. Now in your environment, you might deploy to a test collection first and maybe use something like phase deployments to roll it out to your broader audience. In my environment, I'm going to choose the collection I created previously for all my Microsoft 365 apps. Each time the rule runs and finds new updates, I want to add to an existing software update group. There's so few updates for Microsoft 365 apps, and they will expire out and clean up automatically. I don't want to manage a bunch of individual update groups. And then I want to enable the deployment after this rule is run so that basically the rule will run and the deployment will go live for that collection. On deployment settings, I'm going to leave mine as required because I want this to be enforced on my devices. Then we'll go ahead and click next again. On this page of the wizard, you need to specify the search criteria that the rule will use to identify the necessary updates. I'll start off by selecting the product property, clicking on the link. We'll scroll down the list here, locate the Office category, select the Microsoft 365 Apps Office 2019 Office LTSC product, click OK. Then I'm going to go ahead and add required. And for required, we're going to type in greater than or equal to 1. So at least one device in my environment needs to require this update. If I hit preview right now, you can see I see all 4 of the updates I was showing previously when we were doing the manual method, and we know that's not correct. So I'm going to hit close and clean this up a bit. I'm going to add the superseded property, and we'll set that to no. Now if I hit preview, okay, now I'm down to 2, but if I look at the titles, I see I'm getting the feature update and the extended support update. Let's go ahead and add the title property now so we can filter down those results a little bit further. With this in place, you can basically put in any search strings to go off of the title. So in my case, I know Monthly Enterprise has 2 possibilities. It's going to be Monthly Enterprise Channel Feature Update or Monthly Enterprise Channel Extended Quality Update. So I'm going to say Monthly Enterprise Channel Feature Update and hit Add. Then OK, and I'll click Preview, and I'm good to go. I got my one update that I want, and I know that naming convention is going to work every month. Now, if you're on something like semi-annual, you'll have feature update, quality update, extended quality update, and also preview updates because there is a preview channel for semi-annual that uses the same name. So in that case, you might have something like title equals semi-annual enterprise channel. Then you have a minus preview minus extended. So that way, the only updates that are eligible are those that have feature in the title or quality. And because feature and quality updates do supersede one another, you should only be getting the most recent one in your ADR. With those settings specified, we'll go ahead and click next. Now you're into evaluation schedule. I'll go ahead and leave the default to occur after a software update point synchronization. Then we'll go to deployment schedule, personal preference. I'm going to leave the defaults as is. User experience, again, personal preference. I will leave the defaults. Alerts, we don't need to worry about. Deployment package, so this is standard software update management. So we'll go ahead and either choose select a deployment package, create a new one, or in my case, I'm going to say no deployment package. Let the clients download from the CDN by themselves. So in this case, I don't have to do any content management. It will always come from the CDN. And then download settings. Again, this isn't really important because my clients are going out to the internet to get their downloads, not to a distribution point. So I'll just leave these as they are. Click next. And then on the summary page, make sure everything looks good. If you choose to, you can save this as a template in the event that you're going to create another ADR, maybe for another channel. It'll be a little bit easier to go through. And then next, for the progress to go through. And then finally, you can close out of that wizard. When we get back to the main window for automatic deployment rules, we can see our new rule here. And I can right click on this rule and I can choose to run it right now, in which case it's going to go create that software update group and start staging that initial deployment. From that point forward, this will run automatically. All you kind of really need to do is make sure the software update group that got created has the right updates in it and monitor your update and compliance reports. The third step in the lifecycle management of Microsoft 365 apps is going to focus in on monitoring and reporting. Now, if you're an existing ConfigMgr admin, you probably deal with a lot of these reports already, and you know there's a lot of data here available to you. So let's jump into the console and take a look at some examples. Many of the day-to-day tasks that you do with Configuration Manager are based on the collections that you create. Earlier, we created a collection for all of our devices running M365 apps. What I've done here is created some additional collections based on other criteria. So for example, those running particular update channels, which is great for reporting, but also if you're doing a channel migration, those running specific builds, maybe if you need to target something specific to a particular build. And this one down here is anything with a version less than 2008, which is very helpful if you're trying to onboard with the M365 Apps Admin Center, specifically inventory and servicing profiles. Now, the queries used for all of these collections will be in a link in the description below, and you can build these out in your environment. Another option you have to pull this type of information or other attributes related to M365 apps quickly is CMPivot. So for this example, I'm going to select the top collection here, right click, choose Start CMPivot. And with this tool, we're basically doing a real-time data collection off of the devices that are connected. So in the query window here, I'm going to go ahead and paste in a pre-written query, which I'll have in the description below. Run that query. Now it's already pre-populated a table based on the last time I ran this query. So you can see the results I'd expect to see. And right now it's reaching out to 6 objects and pulling this information. I can also choose to create a collection which will have static membership based on the results, or export the data to later filter in a separate workflow. And now that query is complete, I can see all of the records here in the table. The Office 365 Client Management Dashboard is another location where you can get information relative to your apps. Now, this is based on hardware inventory that already exists in the database, but you can see we have some nice summarized insights around total install count, devices without Office, languages, versions, and channels. And you can also check out the Upgrade Readiness Dashboard. This is great for if you're moving to a new version of Office, you want to see things like add-ins and macros, this would be the place to check out. Just make sure you meet the requirements. Check out the documentation relative to the Upgrade Readiness Dashboard for that. As you're managing Microsoft 365 apps with ConfigMgr, deployments are another key aspect. So if you head over to the monitoring workspace and click on the deployments node, you'll find all of the deployments in your environment. And what I've done here is filtered it down to the ones that I'm most interested in. So I have my automatic deployment rule. This is actually the software update group created by that rule. And then I have my application for Microsoft 365 apps. I can see a bird's eye view on the compliance information and the feature type, also whether it's required or available. If I right click, I can choose a number of columns for other information I want to monitor, or I can right click on any one of these and choose View Status, which will take me into a drill down, and I can go by different statuses that my devices are in. Also keep in mind, this is a summarized report. This is not current as of what's in the database. If you want to, you can come up to the top right and refresh the summarization data to kick that off. ConfigMgr includes an extensive library of built-in reports, and you can get to these by going to the monitoring workspace and then drilling down under reporting. As you can see, there's a number of subdirectories here broken down by the different types of reports. So for example, we deployed a software update for Microsoft 365 apps, and we want to get the compliance for that update. To do this, you could go to the software updates folder and we'll go ahead and run compliance to specific software update. We can right click on that, and I'm going to choose run in browser. The benefits of running it in the browser is you can bookmark this and also run it from a device that may not have the console installed. First off, we need to specify the collection where the updates are assigned. Next, we'll need to fill in an update filter. Specifically, I'm going to provide the title of that update. Okay, with those items filled in, we'll go ahead and run report. And here's my update and my status information. I can also click on the update title and drill down a layer deeper, and I can drill in further on update is required. And here I can see now what the device is that requires this update and the last time information was received about that device. That's going to conclude my overview on the lifecycle management of Microsoft 365 apps using Configuration Manager. Now, I covered a lot of topics in this video, so if you're going back to rewatch any of the material, check out the description and I'll have timestamps for each section. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, feel free to post those down below as well, and I will try and get back to you as quickly as I can. If you like the video and the content we're producing, we ask that you like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to release new content. And if you're part of any IT communities where this sounds like it might be helpful to them, please feel free to share these resources. Okay, until next time, keep on deploying.